believe that the trade-off has to be at the expense of every community that could potentially be the site of a mine. So, Mr. Chairman, I actually strongly urge my colleagues to vote yes for this common sense amendment to restore an environmental analysis process that in fact has worked. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I'd like to remind my colleague from Virginia that this administration has streamlined NEPA for several uses during its time in office, for renewable energy projects, for highways, for the so-called stimulus that we had in 2007. So this administration, at times anyway, sees the need to balance the creation of jobs with protecting the environment, but not allowing environmental regulations to be used to endlessly delay projects. Your amendment, I'm afraid, would, Mr. Chairman, this amendment, I'm afraid, would endlessly delay the production of the projects that we need to produce critical and strategic minerals. So for that reason, I urge a no vote. How much time do I have left, may I inquire?
The gentleman has 1.5 minutes left.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to my colleague and friend from New Mexico, Representative Pierce.
The gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman for yielding. Would make the comment to my friend from Virginia that we in the West, we're being protected from ourselves. We're being protected from jobs. The devastation is in our jobs. I've got one county. I've got 18 counties. One county is 7,000 square miles. That's 3 times the size of Delaware. It's 6 times the size of Rhode Island, and it's got a population of 3,725 people. And the jobs have gone away. There used to be 11 rare earth mineral mines in the southern district of New Mexico. Today there are none. All of those jobs have gone to China. This is just a common sense bill that says we're going to go through the process. We have economies that are being devastated, but it's not an environmental devastation. It is from the environmentalists who will sue to stop every single job in the West. We've lost our mining jobs. We've lost our timber jobs. These are areas that are not sitting out here making life unlivable and unhealthy. These are areas that are looking for jobs. And so I would urge a no vote on the amendment with respect to my friend and yield back the time.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman has the only time remaining. Do you care to close?
I'll wrap up with the remaining 30 seconds, Mr. Chairman, and say that if you think it's a good situation for the United States to be lumped in with Papua New Guinea, dead last among mining countries in this world, as shown by a recent study, in that it takes 7 to 10 years to get mining projects off the ground, then you'd like this amendment. But if you don't, if you think we can protect the environment at the same time as creating jobs and strike that balance, which this bill does, then you'll vote no on this amendment and yes on bill number 761. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, on that I would ask for a recorded vote.
The gentleman has requested a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report 113-214. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in House Report number 113-214, offered by Mr. Hastings of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 347, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself so time as I may.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me read the amendment. It's very short. The lead agency with responsibility for issuing a mineral exploration or mine permit may not issue such permit until the applicant for the permit has fully reimbursed the United States, each state, and each Native American tribe for all costs incurred by the United States and such state and such tribe, respectively, for issuance of the permit. Such reimbursement shall include costs of all federal, state, and tribal reviews and approvals required for the permit, contracting costs and salaries, including benefits for state and federal employees, and the conduct of reviews by state or a state that under authority delegated to the state under federal law. Mr. Chairman, the amendment that I offer today to H.R. 761 would reimburse the cost of permitting in order that the National Environment Policy Act requirements be met. Those who complain about the National Environmental Policy Act permitting often cite, and it's been said here repeatedly on the floor, when I was managing the rule earlier today, it was said, they cite timing as a concern. With budget cuts, furloughs, and other competing work, it is not possible to meet all the demands. Reimbursement of any and all costs will help to resolve this issue and provide for meaningful public participation in the decision-making process for the use of federal lands. Mr. Chairman, I would ultimately ask that my amendment be made in order, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the intention behind this amendment, and I thank the gentleman for offering it. I do want to reassure him, though, that the bill and current law already satisfies what he's after, so I would urge a no vote on this amendment. Let me read specifically from the language of the bill. This is on page 9. I'm going to read a paragraph, and hopefully this will alleviate your concerns. Financial assurance, subsection G. The lead agency will determine the amount of financial assurance for reclamation of a mineral exploration or mining site, which must cover the estimated cost if the lead agency were to contract with a third party to reclaim the operations according to the reclamation plan, including construction and maintenance costs for any treatment facilities necessary to meet federal, state, or tribal environmental standards, unquote. So in case the company goes bankrupt, in the worst case scenario, they have to post a bond, and I believe it's equal to 140% of what the reclamation cost would be. So we already have comprehensive regulations in addition to the bill language from the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service. These regulations have been revised during both the Clinton and Bush administrations, so that today both BLM and Forest Service regulations require that exploration and mining activities have the resources necessary to ensure reclamation after it's over, even if the company goes bankrupt. So I appreciate the intention behind this amendment, but I believe it is completely unnecessary. And so for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I would urge a no vote on the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I need to make a correction. I had 2 amendments in the Rules Committee last night, and the one that I just read in to the record and my friend and colleague just responded to was the one that was not made in order. But I'll be very brief, because the one that was made in order, amendment number 4 that we are addressing, requires financial assurance in the form of a surety bond, letter or credit or other instrument that would routinely be accepted in commerce. And in the interest of time, I would only offer, Mr. Chairman, if my full statement on amendment number 4 could be placed in the record. And I'm sure my colleague has time to respond to amendment number 4. If he does not, I would be prepared to yield to him whatever time I have in order for him to respond.
The gentleman's request will be covered by general leave. The gentleman from Florida reserves the balance of the time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
May I inquire of the chairman how much time is remaining for myself?
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me just summarize by saying that we already have it in current law, and it's already addressed in this bill that there must be adequate financial assurances given, including the posting of bonds, I believe, yes, including the posting of bonds, to ensure that the reclamation can take place by contracted for third parties if the company goes bankrupt or for whatever reason can't follow through. All of our western public land states also have comprehensive regulatory and bonding programs covering hard rock mining. That's in addition to the federal laws and regulations. In many of these states, the federal and state agencies work together to jointly manage the reclamation and bonding projects. As of June of 2013, BLM, in conjunction with its state partners, holds more than $2.2 billion currently in financial assurances to reclaim potential mining sites around the U.S. So you can see this is an active and well-funded program that is in place. Under regulation, these holdings are reviewed and adjusted annually to make sure that costs won't spiral out of control if we have inflation or unforeseen contingencies. In some instances, mining companies are required to establish trust funds and build them over the course of the mine life to ensure adequate funding for any long-term treatment facilities that might be necessary to meet federal, state, or tribal environmental standards. So I believe, Mr. Chairman, that there are already in place appropriate and adequate protections and regulations, and the bill respects that also. I respect the gentleman for his intentions on this amendment, but I believe that it is unnecessary, and for that reason I would urge a no vote, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would just say to my colleague that there are deficiencies in, and inadequacies of funding in the measures that you cited to, and that they do not cover the cost of cleanup and accidents. And that's why we are addressing it. Mr. Chairman, I would ask and urge my colleagues to vote aye on this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Florida.
I'd ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report 113-214. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in House Report number 113-214, offered by Mr. Pierce of New Mexico.
Pursuant to House Resolution 347, the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pierce, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer an amendment today to H.R. 761, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act. My amendment is very simple. It only serves to clarify the scope of the bill by stating that it does not impact the rules put in place by Secretarial Order number 3324, issued by the Secretary of the Interior late last year. That order sets in place buffer zones between potash mines and oil and gas drilling, among other requirements. The Permian Basin's potash reserves are some of the purest in the world, and our oil and gas drilling plays a key role in the current energy boom that the current country is experiencing. There's a very long history between potash and drilling operators in the region, and the Secretarial Order helped to clarify some of those issues. I've spent the better part of my career in Congress working to facilitate an agreement between these two industries to ensure both are able to thrive simultaneously. While some have criticisms of the Secretarial Order, it is an important step in the process of assuring the safe extraction of mineral resources. My amendment simply clarifies that the text of the bill cannot be used by the Bureau of Land Management to show favoritism for either potash or oil and gas leases within the area laid out in the Secretarial Order. It does not affect the underlying bill, does not cost the American taxpayers a single dime, It brings economic stability to the Permian Basin and ensures that these two mineral resources can be safely and properly developed side by side. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
I rise to claim the time that is allotted to the opposition to this amendment, although I do not intend to oppose it.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak on this amendment because it makes a point very well that I was making earlier today. We have criticized this bill because while it is being sold as necessary for critical and strategic minerals, the definition is so broad that it would cover virtually all mining on public lands. Now, Mr. Pierce shares our concern. The gentleman is worried that if H.R. 761 is enacted, the definition is broad enough that it would cover even potash. Now, potash is important for fertilizer for crops and for other purposes, but let's be clear, it is not used very much in high-tech manufacturing. It is not used in manufacturing items that are important for our national defense, and it is not scarce. It is one of a long list of minerals that produces money for miners, but should not be covered under this very broad definition in the underlying bill. I agree with Mr. Pierce that potash could be covered under this legislation, and we agree that elevating mining for potash on public lands under this bill could impact other uses of those lands, including the development of oil and gas. So I'm happy to support this amendment to clarify this overly broad definition. Now, I'd like to note that we had an amendment a few moments ago offered by our colleague Mr. Lowenthal, which would fix the definition in this bill by limiting the bill to truly strategic and critical minerals determined as the gentleman, Mr. Lowenthal, described, a really thorough and, let's say, academic definition of those minerals. And it would address not only Mr. Pierce's concerns, but would solve one of the overall problems of this bill. So I'm happy to support the amendment. I thank the gentleman for making our case for us. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, before I yield 30 seconds to the chairman of the subcommittee, I would like to differ with the gentleman from New Jersey, my friend. He said that potash is not very high-tech. When you use a scoop shovel to follow the cows around and use the byproduct from the cattle to fertilize with, potash is extremely high-tech. So with that one exception, I would yield 30 seconds to the chairman of the subcommittee.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, nothing in this bill impacts the important multiple-use mission of our nation's public lands. One of the great stories of America is that our nation recognizes the importance of balancing our land use for many different needs, including mineral and oil and gas development, renewable energy projects, grazing, timber harvest, hunting, fishing, recreation, and other important activities that bring economic vitality to our public lands. This legislation doesn't change that. It simply addresses the long bureaucratic and burdensome permitting timelines required for mineral exploration and mine development by building on executive orders requiring coordination by regulatory agencies to process permits for infrastructure projects in a timely manner and without compromising environmental safeguards. I thank the gentleman for his time, and I yield back.
Gentleman from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other comments and would yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
I move that the committee now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 761, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
Okay. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 761 has come to no resolution thereon. The Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the Chair. Gavel.
Members are expected to vote at about 4:30 Eastern on a mineral production bill that would streamline the permitting process for certain mining operations on federal lands. The House Rules Committee is meeting this afternoon to decide how a couple bills will be debated on the floor, including a nutrition bill that includes changes to food stamps and the continuing resolution to fund the federal government past the end of the month. We have live coverage right now on C-SPAN and cspan.org of that Rules Committee meeting. Here's House Speaker John Boehner announcing that the Chamber will vote on the continuing resolution this week and that language in the funding bill would deny funds for the health care law. He's joined by other House Republican lawmakers.